Okay, so let's kind of deal with this user interface. Perhaps to demonstrate things, we can pick something that looks like text area. So the text area is obviously a control that instead of just being a text box, it will be a text box with multiple lines. So perhaps I can use it to visualize something in it, maybe to animate things, right? So we'll see what other demands we may have for this user interface. But for now, having the button and having this box is quite all right. I'm just going to save that. And again, my preferences are that I want to, number one, is to basically change the variable name, because I cannot live with this variable name. It has to be, I don't know, area, display elevators. Sometimes it's really hard to make a good choice for naming things. So I'm expecting that over time I may decide to change things, but right now this is best describes what I'm trying to do with this. So this is just an area to display maybe position of some elevators that I'm going to have. Okay, so that should do it for now for the user interface, except that, of course, the button needs to have some code attached to it. And again, you can basically, the choice of events, the first thing is basically action performed. So all of these gadgets have default actions in Java Swing, and of course for the button, the default action is a click. So I'm just hoping that this will be the right thing. So again, right click, events, action performed, click that, and it essentially is going to add a method where I can add my code, right? So I can type. You can see how the name of the method, obviously it's opening brace and closing brace. These guys are grayed out. I cannot manually edit this. However, the actual code where it says to do, it can work with. So when I work with this, again, for the sake of testing, I need to, when I click the button, what I'm going to do when I'm clicking the button, it says button move elevator action performed, which is a click, supposedly. We'll see how it all holds on, right? So we're just going to take this area of elevators, right, and just add some text to it. Something silly. We can say set, I guess set text should be something like set text on the set of methods. Yeah, set text. I just hope that this is the right thing to do, right? Set text, and I will say click. I guess right now this is just a click, right? And maybe I can also try a new line just to see how well it's going to take a new line inside the text area and see what that does, right? So there's like one little area right there where I can add my code, and that's fine. So saving this and running it again, right? So now I have the text area, and obviously it's editable, so I can actually type in it, do things like that. But then when I say move, which just simply goes in and replaces it with the click. So perhaps just changing the text to click exclamation point is not exactly what I intend to do eventually, but you can see that this works, and it seems to be adding new line. By the way, I can test it a little bit more. I can say something like this, right? I can say string temp, just temporary string, equals area display elevators, get text, right? Get text, and then basically set text, this temp thing plus, which for strings of course means concatenation, plus the click, right? So it's going to add a click thing to already existing text. So let's make that little change just to see if we're staying in control of it. So run it again, right? So now if I say click, it basically appends the click towards the end of this text. All right, so this is fine, right? So we have some basic display. Now it's time to start thinking maybe about the business objects, right? So we've added this demo view. Perhaps one thing to look at is, again, that main method. So far I have only one file in this project, right? That file is kind of like guarded and maintained by all of these design wizards associated with the JFrame inside of my NetBeans environment, right? But the main method is there, and by the way, it's in its entirety, right? It's editable. So if I wanted to, I could just delete it. If I said, well, it's really a waste of space in my code, I could have deleted it here. So it's just for your convenience. So it's available for us to get rid of it. But right now, let's just examine what happens here. And what happens here, this is sort of like looks familiar since Thursday. It says event queue, and remember, event queue is for event dispatch thread, which supposed to process and do the work with process everything and do the work with graphical user interface, swing components, right? We have to, instead of going directly to any gadget or window or frame, we must say, do this later. And do this later, it means as soon as the event dispatch thread is ready to do something, it will pick it up and it will do it for us. So what happens here is it just simply says create new main, create the frame main view, which is the object that represents the entire form on the screen, and without even naming it, without storing it, just say set visible, right? And just makes it visible true. So we have a chance to basically start the window invisible, maybe configure it. You can even visually move things around inside the window, but eventually you want to set it visible. But what I'm thinking about this main method right now, that obviously once we get inside this run, remember from demonstrations again since last week, we said that this run already happens inside the event dispatch thread. We carefully switch over to it and it will start doing stuff for us. So we can, this is where my plan is. Create, let me just switch off the caps, create the controller object, right? Create the, maybe create the window. I have some choices to make, but my plan is to create the window, which already kind of happens here. You can see it says new frame main window. That's what creates the window object, right? Then perhaps let controller know the window, right? So the window will be accessible by the controller, right? And then maybe execute initialization of all required business objects, right? Such as elevator bank, right? The bank of elevators, the individual elevators, maybe, you know, just obvious pieces that we want to start playing with, right? So that's the plan. It has to happen early. We have to have the window, we have to have the controller, and we have to have the business objects, right? By the way, parts of this, right? I don't know which parts of it, but many of this, except creation of the window, could be happening actually before, right? Before we go and say, event queue, now do this for us. So we have choices to do this on our main thread or to do this on the event dispatch thread. So typically, the distinction here, or something that should guide you, is that you should not prolong the execution on the event dispatch thread. You should not overburden event dispatch thread with lengthy calls to the database, which may not come back in seconds, sometimes longer time, right? But right now, for the simplicity's sake, I will do everything inside the run method. So then, again, perhaps what I can do here is that maybe for the sake of demonstration, I can do something like this. Essentially, right here, we can create the controller object. Then we can execute initialization of all required business objects, plural, right? And then we can, inside the inside the event dispatch thread, we have to create the window. We have to let the controller know what the window is, right? Whatever, right? And then we can visualize the window, something like that, make it visible, right? So there could be this plan, right? But that's what we're just planning for, I guess, because we want to move in that direction. All right. So that's the plan. But before we can do all of this, let's create the controller class, right? So again, for the sake of simplicity, I'm keeping everything inside the demo package, not extending into other packages, but eventually these things should probably be separated. All the presentation layer should be in one package, controllers can be in their own package of controllers, and all the business objects could be in other multiple packages that essentially represents different business components of our system. Okay, all right, so let's create the objects.